A deadly day in the Middle East ahead of Pope Benedict's trip to Lebanon.
Lebanon is, I think, different. It has the highest percentage of Christians in the Middle East, so I'm hoping that things will be different there.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Vatican says Pope Benedict's trip to Lebanon is still set for Friday despite violent uprisings in the past 24 hours against U.S. embassies in the Middle East. America's ambassador to Libya, J. Christopher Stevens, was among those killed in a rocket-propelled grenade assault on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. 3 other Americans, all State Department staffers, also died in the attack. Stevens is the first U.S. ambassador killed in the line of duty since 1979. Meanwhile, in Cairo, a mob of protesters tore the American flag from the U.S. Embassy. Initial reports said the violence in Egypt and Libya was sparked by the online release of a film mocking Islam and depicting the Prophet Muhammad as a child molester, womanizer, and ruthless killer. In a statement, Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi says that, quote, unjustified offense and provocations against Muslim sensibilities are once again evident. Lombardi says the result is unacceptable violence. But U.S. officials now suspect the violence, particularly in Libya, may have been intended to coincide with the anniversary of the September 11th attacks rather than as protests to the controversial film. And preparations continue for the Pope's trip to Lebanon. He's due to arrive in Beirut on Friday. For a better understanding of the situation in the Middle East, I spoke earlier with Father Elias Mallon. He's chairperson of Catholic-Muslim Dialogue for the Archdiocese of New York. Father, we wake this morning to news of this terrible attack against our embassy in Libya, the death of Ambassador Stevens and 3 other Americans, and of course our hearts go out to the families of the victims. Were you at all, what is your initial reaction to these horrible attacks and the reasons for the attacks, which was the anti-Islamic film trailer that was being portrayed on YouTube?
Yeah. The first thing I think is, here we go again, that somebody, for whatever reasons, most of the time I can't understand them, has done something stupid and generally unnecessary. I mean, sometimes there are things that you have to do that make people unhappy. But like burning the Quran and coming out with a film like this, like, I don't understand why.
The U.S. government obviously has taken a lot of action to protect our embassies and our diplomats abroad. And in keeping with that, President Obama and Secretary Clinton coming out and saying, obviously, that there is no excuse for this attack, echoing your sentiment, and also saying that, of course, this is just a small group of extremists, and this does not reflect the Libya and the U.S. relations that we've been trying so hard to build since last year. Is this indicative not only of the politics, but of the interreligious type of dynamic that's going on over in Libya?
There's, I don't think, much going on in terms of interreligious dialogue in Libya, because the Christian presence there would mostly be expatriates, and I'm not sure there is much of an indigenous Christian population, unlike Egypt, where 10% of the population is Christian. But it's sort of the shadow side of interreligious dialogue, that there are some people for whom interreligious dialogue is by definition evil. It's selling out, and which of course it's not. And so, I mean, no person engaged in interreligious dialogue would approve of a movie like that. Muslims hold the Prophet in almost greater esteem than Christians would hold Jesus. Now, they don't think Muhammad is God. They don't believe that. But yet, the intense,
but they have a profound reverence.
Love and reverence for the Prophet is very, very strong. And so to do that, I mean, people much more innocently have gotten into trouble for saying things about the Prophet that were more in terms of academic, whereas this is a deliberate attempt
And Father, you mentioned earlier that there is the threat that this could spread. Historically, we have seen this type of viral activity based on one specific incident, which of course calls to mind now that our Pope will be visiting Lebanon at the end of this week. And his mission obviously is one of peace and one to create a discourse among interreligious faiths. But now this presents an issue of safety. If we can't safeguard a U.S. facility that is so heavily occupied with soldiers and government presence, how do we safeguard our religious institutions, Catholic churches, Christian churches?
It all depends where you are. It seems like in Iraq, there's no way you can protect them. They're open targets. In Syria, they're just one of many targets, but that's still a target. Lebanon is, I think, different. It has the highest percentage of Christians in the Middle East. The relationship between the Maronites and Hezbollah is fairly good. So I'm hoping that things will be different there.
When you think about the discourse that is going to happen actually right now in the Middle East with Pope Benedict visiting, what are you hoping to hear? What impact can Pope Benedict's visit have in a region that, while they are, as you just mentioned, enjoying some kind of community, there's still so much unrest, political and spiritual. What are you hoping to hear?
Well, I just did a little blog article for America Magazine. It should be on this week. And I said that in terms of Catholic theology and ecumenical dialogue, they always talk about the Bishop of Rome as a center of unity, and then they refer to the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus says to Peter, and you in turn will strengthen your brothers. And so in my article I said this thing of unifying and strengthening, it's clearly a visit to Christians. Now, there are all kinds of Christians in the Middle East, all different kinds of Catholic Christians in the Middle East, not just Latin Catholics. There's Latin, there's Maronite, there's Syriac, there's Armenian. In fact, I checked it out. In Aleppo, in Syria, there are 5 Catholic bishops of different Eastern Rite churches. One of the things that was a topic at the Synod is it's very easy, they use the word denominationalism.
Yes.
And so the Syriac Catholics, they can end up thinking just about their own group. And the Maronites just about their own, and the Armenians about their own. We can't do that anymore, especially in a crisis like this in the Middle East. Christians have to realize that the fate of one of the churches is the fate of all of the churches. And then in addition, there are the Orthodox churches. I tend to think the relationship between the Catholics and Orthodox in the Middle East is pretty good. But this is a time where things can change. And one of the things that I'm hoping that the Pope does is call the Christians to a unity that's really necessary for survival, and then to encourage them.
Okay, Father, thank you so much. As I said, there's never enough time to discuss a topic like this, but I do appreciate your insight and perspective, and we'll certainly have you back.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be able to do it.
You're very welcome.